You see, there's something quite curious about our need to map the uncharted, to arrange the ineffable into tidy diagrams of progress and attainment. Humanity has never been content simply to be. We must be going somewhere. So we invent ladders, stages, hierarchies, 7 chakras, 9 heavens, 10 sephirot, as though consciousness were a skyscraper, and we're forever climbing toward the penthouse suite of enlightenment. Now, these maps are charming. They give us a sense of direction and the feeling that existence has a structure we can grasp. But have you ever noticed how every map implies a traveler? That the moment we draw a path, we create the illusion of someone distinct from the path, the one who follows it. And therein lies the trick. For consciousness, the very thing we imagine we're moving through, is not a landscape external to us. It's what we are. When you chase consciousness as if it were a prize at the top of the mountain, you overlook the obvious. You were never outside it. The mountain, the climber, the climb, all waves on the same sea. Yet still, we cling to our ladders, because the mind, that marvelous little problem solver, despises the open sky. It prefers coordinates, categories, progress reports. It says, I was here, I'm going there. And enlightenment is precisely 17 rungs above. But the deeper joke is that these maps are drawn on the very paper of the mind they seek to transcend. The moment you sketch the infinite, you've already reduced it to inches. The divine cannot be folded into a chart, because the chart itself floats within the divine. We forget that every system of thought is just a finger dipped into water, beautiful ripples. Yes, but never the ocean itself. So we must ask, why are we so enamored with the idea of levels at all? Perhaps because we fear being lost. A map, even a wrong one, gives comfort. It reassures us that reality can be navigated. Yet what if the truest safety is in realizing there was nowhere to go? What if the highest level is not a summit above, but a silence beneath the ground upon which the ladder stands? For the spiritual adventure, you see, is not an ascent, but a homecoming, not a climb to heaven, but a sinking into what has always been. The maps point upward, but consciousness moves inward, and inward has no direction, no distance, no scale. It is the still point from which all paths arise and to which they all return. And so, before we can speak of the hidden 8th level, we must first understand this fundamental mischief, that every map of reality, no matter how intricate, is drawn by reality itself, playing at ignorance, pretending, for a while, to be lost, so that it might know again the joy of being found. When people first turn their attention inward, they often imagine that consciousness unfolds like a staircase. Each step brings them closer to truth. Each level promises a purer light. And so, the sages of old spoke of 7 heavens, 7 chakras, 7 seals, numbers as sacred as the circles of the sky. They saw in these patterns an echo of order, a rhythm in the great cosmic dance. And there is nothing wrong with that. These levels are like the colors of a rainbow, each distinct, each beautiful, and together forming a single beam of light. The mistake lies not in seeing the colors, but in thinking that one must climb from red to violet as though the rainbow were a ladder. For you see, to speak of levels is already to separate what was never apart. It suggests that consciousness is a kind of building, and you, a weary tenant, must haul your luggage to the top floor before you can finally meet God. But the funny thing is, the elevator never moves, for there is no building at all. There is only the space in which the idea of a building arises. We cling to levels because we love progress. Progress gives meaning to time, and time gives us the comforting illusion of control. The mind says, I am not yet enlightened, but if I meditate long enough, read the right books, eat the right foods, eventually I'll reach level 7 cosmic consciousness. Yet the very one who seeks to climb is the illusion itself. The ladder belongs to the dream. It's like playing a game of hide and seek with yourself. You pretend to be lost so that you may enjoy the delight of being found. You hide behind the notion of 7 stages so that one day you can tear up the chart and laugh, realizing you were home all along. Imagine, for a moment, the ocean. Each wave believes itself to be rising higher and higher, as if the purpose of the sea were to achieve a perfect crest. But every peak must fall, every form dissolve, and in that dissolution, the wave discovers what it always was, water, never separate, never in motion toward anything at all. The sea was never a hierarchy, it was a happening. So, when I speak of an 8th level, do not mistake it for another rung to climb. It is not the top of the tower, but the ground beneath it, the silent origin from which all ladders sprout and to which they inevitably return. You cannot reach it, for you never left it. To see this is to smile at the old maps, not to scorn them, but to appreciate their art. They are poetry, not engineering. They point beautifully towards something they can never contain. And once you know this, the obsession with ascent begins to fade. You no longer strain to rise above the world, for you see that the whole sky was already within you. And now we come to what I call the hidden 8th level hidden, not because it is secret, but because it is too obvious to see. You overlook it precisely because it is always here. It is the canvas behind the painting, the silence that allows the music to be heard, the empty space without which the dance could not occur. The 8th level is not a new height to be attained, but a depth remembered. It is not above the others, it is beneath them, beneath everything. It is the still ground upon which the entire ladder stands, the quiet foundation of every thought, every breath, every flicker of awareness. If you try to look for it, you will miss it, because it is the one who's looking. The awareness itself cannot be seen. It is the light by which seeing happens. You cannot step outside of it to examine it. Just as fire cannot burn itself, awareness cannot perceive itself as an object. And yet, everything that appears, every sensation, every idea, every emotion is nothing but that awareness taking form for a moment, playing at being something it is not, you see. What we call the self, the thinker behind the thoughts, the doer behind the deeds, is merely a ripple in this vast sea of consciousness. The wave imagines it has a name, a purpose, a separate destiny. But when the wave relaxes, when it stops trying to climb higher than the others, it discovers it has never been anything but ocean all along. The silence beneath all levels is not a void, not an emptiness that negates life. It is a fullness so complete that it has no need to assert itself. It does not shout. It whispers. In every movement of the wind, in every flicker of light, in the beating of your own heart, it says without words, I am that which is aware. This 8th level cannot be taught, for it cannot be known as knowledge. It can only be recognized. And recognition happens when the climbing stops. When you no longer strive to rise above yourself, when you no longer try to possess awareness as a prize, then, quite suddenly, you find yourself being what you sought. It is as if a man spent his life searching for his spectacles, only to realize he has been wearing them all along. The search was not in vain. It was the game through which realization became possible. But once the glasses are found, the game ends with a laugh. So, this 8th level is not the top of the mountain. It is the mountain itself. It is the stillness before thought, the pause between breaths, the awareness that quietly watches both joy and sorrow rise and fade. It is here, now, listening to these very words. You don't have to reach it, you can't, because you never left it. You see, there's a delightful mischief in all of this. for the very effort to find the ground of being is what keeps you from resting upon it. Seeking it is like running after your own shadow. The faster you chase, the faster it runs away. Because the one who seeks, the one who grasps, is precisely what veils the seeing. Imagine the eye trying to look at itself. It may turn this way and that, use mirrors, employ instruments, and yet it can never see itself directly. It can only see its reflection. In the same way, the self that strives to perceive its source merely catches, echoes, and reflections, thoughts about awareness, feelings about enlightenment, never the thing itself. For awareness is not an object among objects, it is the field within which all objects appear. Now, this doesn't mean you should stop meditating or pondering. Those too are movements of the same awareness. But understand, the ground cannot be attained because it is not somewhere else. The search ends not in discovery but in recognition. It dawns when the seeker grows weary enough to laugh, and in that laughter, the whole cosmic joke is revealed. The joke, of course, is that the ground was never hidden. It is what allows the very thought, I must find the ground, to arise. It is there in the confusion, in the longing, in the seeking itself. The river doesn't have to run back to the spring. The spring is what the river is. Every genuine awakening, then, is a kind of surrender, but not the grim surrender of defeat. It is the surrender of a wave, realizing it was never separate from the sea. A soft smile replaces the struggle, and you stop trying to hold yourself together, because you see there's no self to hold. When the search ends, nothing dramatic occurs. There are no fireworks, no angels singing in the sky. Things simply become obvious. The weight of effort slips away, and the very stillness you sought reveals itself as the stillness that had always been here, quietly watching the play of striving and surrender alike. That is why I say the ground is not found, it ceased to be forgotten. You don't arrive at it, you remember that you never left. And once this is seen, the climbing ends. The map folds itself up, the compass rests, and all directions point inward, not as a journey, but as home. Let us look, then, at how this marvelous illusion is built, how the mind, in its brilliance, constructs the ladder it then insists on climbing. You see, the mind is a pattern maker, a divider, a classifier. It loves to chop the seamless flow of experience into neat little pieces, to label this good, that bad, this spiritual, that mundane. And once the cutting has begun, the mind looks upon its collection of fragments and declares, ah, behold, levels. It is as though the ocean, upon noticing its own waves, suddenly believes that the crests are superior to the troughs. It forgets that both rise and fall from the same depth. The mind does precisely this. It takes the play of consciousness, the natural ebb and flow of perception, and arranges it into a hierarchy. Why? Because hierarchy gives the illusion of progress, and progress gives the illusion of purpose. You and I are born into a world obsessed with purpose. Every child is told, become someone, go somewhere, achieve something. So naturally, when we enter the inner world, we carry the same logic with us. We think, if I just meditate long enough, purify myself, and detach from worldly things, I will arrive. But consciousness is not a career path. You cannot promote yourself from one level of being to another. The whole notion of advancement belongs to the world of measurement, the realm of clocks, rulers, and report cards, and consciousness does not live there. The irony is exquisite. The ego wants to transcend itself. It says, I will become enlightened, like a thief trying to arrest himself, or a fire trying to extinguish its own flame. The ego's cleverness is endless. It even disguises its ambition as humility. It says, I am only a humble seeker, while secretly imagining the glory of awakening. And yet, this too is part of the play. For the striving of the ego is how consciousness amuses itself, pretending to be lost, so that it may rediscover what it already is. Without the illusion of separation, there could be no joy of reunion. Without the climb, no delight in discovering there was nowhere to climb to. You see, the ladder exists only in thought. The instant the mind stops measuring, the rungs vanish. The whole elaborate structure collapses into the simple awareness that was present from the beginning. When you recognize this, something very gentle happens. You stop trying to fix yourself, to improve yourself, to rise above what you are. You simply allow what is. And in that allowing, the most extraordinary thing occurs. Life, just as it is, becomes luminous. Ordinary moments, drinking tea, hearing the rain, feeling the breath move in and out, reveal themselves as divine events. That is when the ladder dissolves. Not because you've reached the top, but because you finally see there was never a bottom to begin with. The mind that built it was only drawing chalk lines on the ocean. When the ladder finally dissolves, when the mind's architecture of stages and levels collapses back into silence, something remarkable happens. Nothing changes, and yet everything is transformed. You don't ascend into heaven. You discover heaven was the ground beneath your feet. You don't become divine. You realize you were never anything else. The collapse of levels isn't a catastrophe, it's a comedy. The whole hierarchy, so solemnly constructed, folds in on itself like a paper fan, and in its place appears the simple truth that there was never a hierarchy at all, only the dance of one movement, pretending to be many. Imagine the ocean again. Waves rise and fall, splash and foam, each believing for a time that it's separate, that it must achieve a certain height before it can merge with the sea. But when one wave suddenly realizes its watery nature, it doesn't dissolve out of existence, it laughs. It sees that it has always been the sea, playing at waving. This is what we mean when we speak of Lila, the cosmic play. The universe is not a factory, it's not a school, and it's certainly not a prison. It's a grand game of hide and seek, a spontaneous improvisation in which the self pretends to lose itself only to enjoy the thrill of remembering. And what a marvelous drama it is. Suns burning for billions of years, lovers meeting and parting, civilizations rising and falling, all of it the same infinite consciousness, wearing different masks, singing different songs. There is no serious agenda behind it, no divine accountant keeping score. The purpose of the dance is the dancing. When you see this, a wonderful lightness enters your being. You stop judging experiences as higher or lower, holier or baser. You realize that the saint and the sinner, the wise man and the fool, the sound of laughter and the sound of weeping, all are movements of the same symphony. Life ceases to be a staircase and becomes a spiral, not leading upward or downward, but turning endlessly through itself, like the petals of a flower. You are no longer struggling to transcend the world. You are the world expressing itself through the miracle of your existence. And this realization, far from making one aloof or detached, fills the heart with compassion. For if all beings are waves of the same ocean, then the joy and sorrow of each are your own. To harm another is to bruise yourself. To love another is to recognize yourself. Thus, the collapse of levels is not an end, it's the beginning of play. The solemn search gives way to laughter, and enlightenment ceases to be an achievement. It becomes the childlike wonder of simply being alive, of hearing the rain, seeing the stars, and whispering with quiet awe. Ah, so this is it. When the play is seen for what it is, you begin to live quite differently, not in some holy trance, not haloed with light, but in a deep, unhurried ease. Enlightenment ceases to be a state to maintain. It becomes the very texture of your breathing, the unremarkable grace of being exactly where you are. You see, we often imagine that awakening will make life dazzling, that flowers will glow, and angels will sing, and the universe will whisper secrets meant only for us. But what truly happens is much simpler and far more beautiful. You stop fighting with what is. You no longer need to arrange existence into the shapes you prefer. The world doesn't have to obey your wishes anymore for you to love it. Everyday life, yes. Even the laundry, the commute, the endless small conversations becomes radiant in its ordinariness. When you make tea, you notice that boiling water, steam, the clinking of the cup, all of it is consciousness playing at being domestic. When you listen to the rain, you realize that what you call rain and what you call you are part of the same unfolding process. Water circulating through itself. There's no longer a sense of someone standing behind your eyes, operating a machine called the body. You don't live in your body, you are the body. You are what your body is doing, what the wind is doing, what the whole universe is doing right now. And this doesn't make you indifferent. On the contrary, it makes you tender. For when there is no longer a wall between me and the world, everything becomes dear. You find compassion arising naturally, not as a moral duty, but as a spontaneous resonance. To hurt another would feel as absurd as the right hand striking the left and calling it victory. The sense of struggle fades. You still act, still choose, still feel joy and pain, but without the tightness of, I must make this happen. Actions happen of their own accord, guided by the same intelligence that spins galaxies and blossoms flowers. You don't push the river anymore, you flow with it. This is what I mean by ordinary enlightenment. It's not a condition of perpetual ecstasy, but of effortless intimacy with life. You're not above the world. You're woven through it. You feel hunger and eat. You feel tired and rest. You feel sadness and let it rain, without making a storm of meaning about it. And in this ordinariness, there's a profound sense of wonder. For you realize that the extraordinary was never somewhere else. It was hiding in plain sight, in the sunlight on your hands, in the sound of laughter, in the silence between heartbeats. To live from the ground is to trust the dance, to move without trying to choreograph it. You let life live itself through you. You don't need to be spiritual. You only need to be real. And in being real, you find that the divine has never been elsewhere. Now, it's natural to ask, if there's nowhere to go, what are we to do? If enlightenment isn't something to achieve, should we simply sit idle, waiting for grace to descend? But that question itself belongs to the same old misunderstanding that consciousness needs to get somewhere. You see, the real function of spiritual practice is not to take you higher, but to bring you home. The practices worth keeping are not ladders, but mirrors. They don't lead you forward. They show you where you already stand. Meditation, for instance, is not an effort to still the mind. You can't force the waves to stop without stirring them further. Meditation is the art of watching the waves and discovering that you are the sea. The thoughts rise and fall, but the ocean beneath them never moves. Or take the breath. You think you are breathing, but notice the breathing is happening by itself. You can stop interfering with it, stop controlling it, and simply watch. That rhythm you call my breath is the universe pulsing through you, air and life trading places in perfect harmony. You can practice listening, too, not to gain insight, but to hear how sound arises out of silence and returns to it. The hum of a refrigerator, a bird's call, the whisper of wind through leaves, all of it is consciousness talking to itself. When you listen, without naming, without judging, you fall into that wordless stillness which was here before sound began. Even the most ordinary acts, washing dishes, walking, tying your shoes, can become doorways. If you attend to them fully, without the story of I am doing this, you find there is no doer, only doing. The dish is washed, the foot lifts and falls, the lace tightens, all of it a spontaneous unfolding of the same mystery. None of these are methods for becoming awakened. They are invitations to notice that awakening is what you already are. They don't progress you along a path, they erase the idea of a path entirely. The great trap of spiritual effort is that it secretly believes in a you who must become divine. But the point of every true practice is to reveal that divinity has been living as you all along. So, don't practice to arrive. Practice to remember. Practice to rest. Practice as play. Let meditation be a gentle curiosity, not a task. Let silence be not something to enter, but something that has always been carrying you. When the mind no longer demands progress, when each moment becomes its own arrival, that is when the practices dissolve into pure being, and the teacher, the method, the goal, all vanish into a single, infinite now. And now, when the mind has grown still enough to see, another illusion gently disappears, the illusion of the teacher and the teaching. You come to realize that every word, every gesture, every so-called master, pointing toward truth, was like a finger drawing circles in water. The circles shimmer for a moment and vanish, leaving only the water itself. The teacher's voice was never separate from the silence that carried it. For what can one being truly give to another? At best, a reminder. At best, a mirror. When you hear the words, "Be still and know," what is it that recognizes their meaning? It is not the sound, not the syllables, it is the awareness within you that suddenly nods and says, "Yes, of course." That recognition was the real teaching all along. When you see this, gratitude arises not toward a person, but toward the whole play. You thank the teacher as you might thank a dream for its guidance, knowing that the dream and the dreamer are one. And then even that gratitude dissolves, because there is no longer an I to feel thankful and no other to receive it. There is only the vast listening itself, quietly aware of being aware. The sermon ends where it began, in the same stillness that spoke it. So, when you meet the teacher on the road, as the old Zen saying goes, you bow, you smile, and you let them disappear into the same nowhere from which the words arose. The teaching was never about learning anything. It was about remembering what could never be forgotten. And so, we return to where we began. The 8th level, that hidden foundation, was never truly hidden. It was the first, the original simplicity that gave rise to all the others. We mistook it for a destination only because we imagined we had departed. But you cannot leave what you are. All along, the game was this: consciousness pretending to forget itself so that it might experience the wonder of remembering. The journey up the ladder, the climb through stages and struggles, was never wasted. It was the self-delighting in the play of discovery. But once the mask falls, once the dance is recognized, striving becomes laughter. You see, awakening doesn't change what is. It changes how it is seen. The world doesn't vanish. It shines. The ordinary remains. But now the ordinary is sacred. The dishes still need washing. The bills still come due. But each act, each breath is recognized as the divine movement of life knowing itself. The 8th is the first. The silence that underlies thought is also the song that thought sings. The beginning and the end are one circle, one endless now. And you who have searched, who have climbed, who have dreamed of awakening, were never separate from it for a single instant. So perhaps the true enlightenment is not escape, not attainment, but a homecoming. The realization that the wave has never left the sea, that the dreamer was never trapped in the dream. And when this is seen, what can you do but smile? The maps dissolve, the ladders vanish, and what remains is so simple, so quiet, that you almost miss it until you realize it's been here all along, waiting patiently as you.